The United States is signaling strength toward Iran. This with an aircraft carrier or armada already positioned amid raising concerns of military action in the region. Also with a warning that another carrier could be sent and with sharp words arriving from the White House. At the same time, Washington and Tehran are still talking through intermediaries in Oman. So far, no deal has been announced and no strike ordered either. To break down what's actually happening and what's holding both sides back, joining us now is Chris Doyle, Director of Council for Arab-British Understanding and its current lead spokesperson as well. Thank you for joining me, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Before we even dig further, in line with all the US-Iran developments, I'd like to know what is stopping the US from actually striking Iran right now?
Well, the US could. I mean, it's really a matter of the president giving that order. He's the commander-in-chief. They have an aircraft carrier strike group in the region and other capabilities. So at that level, they could certainly do it. But I think it's very clear that the President Trump, wants a deal. He'd much prefer that. Throughout his political career, he has always been allergic to getting involved in what he sees as never-ending wars, regime change wars. He was very critical of the whole Iraq War of 2003. He would much rather be portrayed as the deal maker in chief, the man who brings about peace. So I think it is a preference for him to have that deal. He uses the deployment of these forces as a strength. It is there to intimidate the Iranian regime, to put them on the back foot, and a reminder, a very important reminder that last June, in that 12-day war that Israel conducted, that the United States did eventually join in. And President Trump has been very clear. He is willing to do this again, but he wants to see such a deal. And it makes sense to try to get for a deal for all sorts of reasons. It will be less costly, less risk to the global economy, to regional security. It will be cheaper. And the question really is the content of that deal. And that's why Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has dashed to Washington to ensure that Israeli ambitions, Israeli concerns are not ignored.
Yes, as you mentioned, Chris, about President Donald Trump, he has also said that the United States is ready to take, quote, very tough, unquote, measures. So if Tehran refuses to accept a deal on its nuclear program and guided weapons, if talks are to fail, let's say, what could these very tough steps actually mean in real terms?
I think everybody assumes these mean military strikes. That's what the president has talked about. The question, of course, is on what? Now, they could attempt further strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities that were targeted last June, but that would somewhat undermine the claim that they had set back the Iranian nuclear program. Then there is the ballistic missile program, which Iran insists is not part of the talks at the moment. So would there be strikes to degrade that? I think they would certainly be part of the strikes because it would be absolutely militarily necessary to take out those capabilities to stop Iran from using those ballistic missiles in any confrontation. But then there could also be decapitation strikes. There could be strikes on the IRGC, other command centers within the Iranian military system. They could even go after the supreme leader himself, the Ayatollah Khamenei. And I think there's a lot of debate about what that could be. But I think what will be interesting is whether President Trump devises these strikes with his military commanders in a way that he can bring them to an end in a reasonably quick order, because he simply will not want to get stuck in it. Remember, he's got a lot of his MAGA support base who don't like the idea of further strikes, who were fond of his position of not getting America into these wars. So he has domestic opposition to doing this, even within his own side of the aisle in the United States.
You're right, Chris. Now, President Trump has also openly talked about sending an additional aircraft carrier to the region while talks are still underway. So what could another aircraft carrier actually change on the ground as one is already positioned there?
Well, obviously, it increases the American military options should the president wish to engage them. I think it really is, though, a show of strength, a show that he's serious. It will create the impression that with such a build-up, that war is inevitable, and that will be the slight risk factor that you deploy all these forces to the region and then feel you have to use them. So I think it's all part of that negotiating strategy of demonstrating to Iran his seriousness of intent that he is prepared to bomb the country.
Now, Chris, as we talk about third parties, we do have Israel to consider as well. President Trump is set to welcome Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House, and Israeli President Isaac Herzog also called Iran, quote, empire of evil, unquote. And all along, Israel has publicly called for tougher action on Iran. So is Israel part of these talks, or could it be just influencing them from the outside?
It's always hard to know how much influence Israel has over the Trump administration. Netanyahu certainly has access. He goes to Washington to see Trump routinely. He's probably seen him more than any other leader. And he will hope to toughen the president's stance. Netanyahu has always been, at least verbally, on the outside, a hawk on Iran. I think that he would be worried that President Trump might dilute the sort of conditions that Israel sees as essential to a credible deal. I mean, Netanyahu will want to see that there is absolutely no uranium enrichment. He wants to see a complete end to the Iranian ballistic missile program. Remember that Iranian ballistic missiles have hit Israel in a number of strikes now. So he will be there to try to impress upon President Trump all of these conditions. But it doesn't always work. There have been many times in which President Trump has not gone with the Netanyahu view, and that includes on Syria, where, for example, the American president lifted sanctions. This was very much against the wishes of the Israeli prime minister. At times also on Iran, he stopped that war, President Trump, back in June, and he pretty much ordered Israeli planes to turn around and stop bombing Iran, that the war had to come to an end. So it'll be tough talks, I suspect. They won't agree on absolutely everything, but Netanyahu will want those reassurances. No doubt they'll also discuss other things like Gaza and the West Bank as well, given the crisis situation, the absolutely catastrophic crisis in the case of Gaza and what's happening there.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining me here. It was a pleasure having you.
Pleasure.